going to be honest. The episodes on Season 8, Disc 2, they were okay. I don't know. They just weren't... Definitely not some of my favorites. They were okay. Like the Chicken Rooster one we have coming up, wasn't too bad. It was probably my favorite on this disc. Most of them, though, fine, but not the ones that were, like, my personal favorites. I will give them credit, though, and say that they did kind of, a couple of them, particularly in this one, did kind of, like, set a darker tone for a couple of scenes. Which was an interesting take, for sure. Heck, one of them in this episode nominated Jerry Stiller for an Emmy. So, thumbs up to that. Still good. But like I said, like, not some of the ones that are the most memorable to me, personally. But we start off, of course, here with the fatigues. This episode, the storylines were, first, of course, the first one was Jerry was dating this girl named Abby, who had a mentor. And, basically she just followed all her orders, basically, and just, was taken under this mentor's wing and for her professional advice and whatnot. The woman basically was just used to having a mentor. And Jerry was fine with it until he met the mentor, and realized who she was dating. No one else other than Kenny Banya. Yep, Banya is back. And of course, Abby was just bragging about how good the duck was there, and Banya's going hey Jerry, the duck's here, the best, Jerry. The best duck, Jerry, the best. Which drives Jerry up a tree, of course. We set the stage for that. Elaine, meanwhile, is, of course, still president of the Peterman catalog right now, since Peterman ran off to Burma. She had received a invitation to a Bob Sacramento party, which I don't know why got sent to her work mail, not just her personal mail. And she received it 3 weeks late. And it was after the party. So she was upset and wanted to fire the person who was the head of the mailroom. They sent the man up, and it's an intimidating army veteran. So Elaine was intimidated by him the whole time. And basically, instead of firing him, she kept promoting him. He was promoted from, to a copywriter. Then he was promoted to a director's position, trying to get everyone else, get him away from him, because all of his pitches were about, violence and just, horrible stuff that was just giving her the creeps and making the rest of the people in the Peterman company very uncomfortable. Of course, they also weren't happy that he kept getting promoted. When she told him that they were no longer with us and he was promoted to a director's position, everybody got up and quit on her. So Eddie was her only hope at the time. And then there's George. George has this storyline where everyone at the Yankees was given a subject they had to give a lecture on at an upcoming Yankees luncheon or whatever it was called. Of course, it was nighttime whenever he was giving his speech at the end of the episode. But he got put with risk management. I've heard the term how many times, I don't know what the heck risk management is. And neither did George. But apparently he had it on his resume or something like that, I don't know. But, I never remembered seeing a resume whenever he interviewed for the Yankees job. So he was trying to find some way, of course, to get that memorized, to get that taken care of. He got this big book that he just was not interested at all whatsoever. He even, of course, fell asleep while reading it. Jerry had to throw a peanut at him to wake him up. He tried to get an audiobook tape for him to use instead of actually reading it, which honestly, I would do that because I don't like reading. And then he had to, I think it was, he found this guy who got audio tapes, which you can get from this blind store or whatnot. Oh, no, sorry, not blind. Yeah, blind store or whatnot. So he went to an eye doctor, purposely failed an eye exam, and he was able to get the tapes. He got the tapes, though, but he hated them because the guy in the tape sounded like him. So he was basically doomed for this lecture. How did he turn around? Find out in a second. And then there was Kramer. Kramer's storyline was he was hosting a Jewish singles event. And he was trying to cook all the food himself. But unfortunately, it was just too much for him. And he was trying to find another cook. He found out, of course, that Frank Costanza was once a cook in the Korean War. However, he was refusing to help Kramer, and George told him he got hit with a lot of shell shock. So he refused to cook again. And there was this scene where they had Kramer go talk to Jerry Stiller. And again, this is like that darker, more soap opera / flashback type moment where they have, they're sitting in the dark living room talking. When Frank's about to tell the story, he takes a sip of whiskey. And then he sits back and starts explaining the story, how back in 1950, he was the cook for his crew during the Korean War, and he was, I guess he had this big container of meat that was, I think it was past the expiration date by a few weeks. But Frank thought, if he would recook everything, still cook it, use the right spices, it would all be okay. Unfortunately, though, I think a combination of the meat being 3 weeks past the expiration date, even though he was arrogant about it, and then he over-seasoned it. Unfortunately, it caused for his crew to get food poisoned. And ever since that night, he's refused to cook again. He's been traumatic by the experience. And he was just he basically just threw Kramer out of his house saying he refused to cook again. So we have all that set up there, right? So how does it all go down? Well, as far as Jerry and and his girlfriend and the mentor Banya goes, Jerry had explained to Abby about how bad of a comedian Kenny Banya is. He refused to go with her to see his show, and of course, sure enough, Jerry was right, because 2 minutes into his Ovaltine routine, they couldn't take it. Cynthia dumped Banya. Abby and Cynthia, the mentor, of course, got into a big argument that ended their partnership. So now Abby does not have a mentor. But she is not wanting to, she's thinking that she needs time away from Jerry because she's not used to not having a mentor. At the same time, George happened to be in the apartment, and he overhears this. He then has an idea. So he goes off and he grabs Abby, and he offers to be her mentor. But his idea of her being a mentor was he wanted her to basically help him put together, a lecture on risk management without basically saying, hey, can you do my homework for me? So he was going to have Abby help basically, write out his lecture on risk management. That didn't go down too well, and we'll explain why. So, and then Jerry, of course, also, well, I'll kind of explain why now. So, then Jerry runs into Banya, who, of course, is down and depressed because his act is horrible. He even thinks he himself is a hack comic, and he's also upset because Cynthia dumped him. And then Jerry was just like, well, you offer him a little bit of words of encouragement, which leads to Banya saying, you think you can help me buy materials? And then, of course, Jerry ends up being Banya's mentor, and he, despite the fact he can't stand Banya, was relishing the opportunity to basically, be a mentor and have a protege. Well, then what happened was Jerry and Abby got into an argument, and Jerry had shown him the folder that had Banya's material. Jerry placed the folder, though, on top of Abby's risk management material for George. When Abby went to leave, she accidentally grabbed Banya's Ovaltine bid. And then Jerry later on accidentally gave Banya George's risk management material. And then, of course, at the end of, well, I'll explain that. I don't want to jump too far ahead. And then Elaine, meanwhile, of course, was, she dealt with, everyone leaving her at the Pyramid Company, except for Eddie, the the Army veteran. And then basically they end up after tweaking some things, they put together a pretty good catalog. And then they were eating dinner, and basically she was asking Eddie, why do some people get like these like psychotic breakdowns and whatnot, this and that. And he was explaining how he had like a bad relationship and something about Jewish women. Then brought the idea to Elaine. Maybe I'll take him to the Jewish singles event for Kramer. Kramer, meanwhile, though, ends up getting Frank Costanza to cook after Frank Costanza gets into an argument with Estelle Costanza over how eggs tasted dry one morning. So he starts to cook and says, I'm back. And then he helps Kramer cook, and everything just turns out fabulous at the Jewish singles event. Of course, there we find out again how Banya was there too, and he says, "Hey, that risk management stuff was a killer, Jerry." He's like, "What risk management stuff?" He was confused, but it ended up turning out good for Banya because he also got Cynthia back. Of course, Jerry didn't get Abby back, but because Jerry didn't respect the mentor protege relationship or whatnot, even though he had one. And then Eddie had met a woman who was impressed that Eddie had been promoted from mailroom to copywriter to a director, and she offered him a job, double his salary. So then Eddie goes and breaks the news to Elaine that he's going to quit and go take their job. Elaine gets upset and shoves him, but at the same time, Eddie was choking on bread. And with him being, in the U.S. Army, wearing his uniform, Frank Costanza sees this and sees the coughing, and gets flashbacks to that night in Korea. And Frank Costanza just went spastic. He's like, "No good, don't eat!" He starts like knocking plates off, like shoving food away. And of course, the episode ends before the end credits, of course, with flipping over the table with all the hot food. And of course, it freezes, the screen freezes, mid, tip, and you hear a big crash, of course, after that, as Frank had obviously tipped over all the food because he thought that he was going to have food poisoning when, again, Eddie was just choking on a piece of bread because of Elaine's shove. So that ruined the Jewish singles event. And then, of course, in the closing credits, George was doing his risk management speech, and again, because Abby had accidentally grabbed Banya's comedy material, he ends up opening up, starts reading it, and starts talking about Ovaltine. Why do they call it Ovaltine? The mug is round. This is round. Should be called Roundtine or whatnot. And then Wilhelm's sitting there going, "That's my protege," all smiling, even though everybody's just like, "What the heck is this?" So yeah, George trying to cheat his way into a successful lecture backfires. Jerry loses out to a woman because he doesn't respect the mentor protege relationship. Kramer was successful with having Frank Costanza help him get over his fear of cooking again, and then it backfires because of Elaine's coworker, who quits on her. So yeah, an okay episode. Like I said, I personally, my favorite scene in this episode is definitely the scene where Frank Costanza does explain to Kramer what happened and why he refuses to cook again. That scene was, I had like a darker, like more dramatic tone to it, which was different. I thought it was very well done. Now, originally, though, there were actually some scenes shot, though, with those flashbacks, where you actually do see, the Army veterans, vomiting into the camera. They had, like, plexiglass and whatnot, which at first everybody thought was funny, but then it was definitely going a little too far and too graphic, so it got cut. It wasn't even shown in the deleted scenes for this episode. So, of course, there was that. Frank Costanza, of course, being in the Army during the Korean War, but in real life also, there's Jerry Stiller, who played him, who was actually an Army veteran as well, but he served in World War II, not in Korea. And of course, it was also revealed, even though Kramer was hosting this Jewish singles event, he was not Jewish, but he was hosting it for someone else he knew, because he wasn't able to be in town for it. And Elaine's not Jewish either, we find out. And that's it. Yeah, that's again, okay episode. Like I said, I didn't hate the episodes on these discs, but like I said, most of them, maybe except for the Kenny Roger, the Chicken Rooster episode, most of them I probably wouldn't go back and watch if I was just like, just like scheming through them, but not a bad episode. And of course, again, I said, I believe Jerry Stiller, because of that scene where he explained, his reasoning for why he doesn't cook anymore with the Korean War incident, that we've nominated him for an Emmy, I believe it was. So yeah. So that's my thoughts, guys, on the Fatigues episode. What are your guys' thoughts on the Fatigues? Make sure to leave your thoughts down in the comment section below. And be sure, as always, to slap a like on the video and subscribe for more content on my channel. And follow me on Twitter as well, at DemandAirboy93. Until then, guys, I'm checking out. I'll catch you all later. Have a great rest of your day. And peace out, everybody.